So hello, Mohammed. It's so good to have you with us. We're here today with Mohamed Mandour. How is it going?
It's going well. I'm really glad to be with you, Laila, and to be great to be with Egypt Migration. It's really an amazing project that I'm following and I'm using for my research, and I'm like always find like the work you are doing is very incredibly important. So thank you for doing this amazing work.
Oh, you're so kind. Thank you. So let's just dive right in. What got you started in your discipline of human rights? What drew you to your to this research field in human rights?
Yeah, I was actually my background is in electric power engineering, and it has nothing to do with human rights. I studied electric power engineering in my undergrad, but when I was in like my undergrad education, the Egyptian Revolution happened. So it was like a milestone, not only for me, but like for my generation. So I started to be interested in politics. I participated in the revolution. I joined political party, and I was asking myself like how I can contribute to this democratic transition, how I can contribute to this revolution, how I can be part of it, but like an active part of it. Uh, this amazing dream didn't last for a long time. So in 2000, in 2013, military coup happened in Egypt, and it changed everything dramatically. So most of the attention of Egyptian activists became centered around human rights, because we have witnessed till now unprecedented level of state repression, enforced disappearance, torture, sending to prison most of the activists, lawyers, human rights defenders. So I thought at this time like this is the most important roles that I can play at this time. So I worked for several Egyptian human rights organizations, including Egyptian Initiative for Personal Rights. I worked for the Law and Society Research Unit at this time, and also at this time my research focused on freedom of religion, the relationship between law and religion, how the Egyptian regime is trying to control the religious sphere in Egypt, and at the same time sending a message that Sisi or the Egyptian regime is renewing the religious discourse, this discourse, but like for the West, but inside they adopted draconian policies in order to control the religious spheres. And I moved to focus on Egyptian civil society and NGO laws in Egypt. And at this time, there was this crackdown by the Egyptian regime over the civil society organization, specifically the human rights organization, and also worked on indigenous people rights in Egypt and Europeans. And then I decided to leave Egypt because the situation there drove me to do that. So I moved to Tunisia and I worked for the Cairo Institute for Human Rights Studies. With them, I focused on also freedom of religion, and I wrote a paper on how the Egyptian regime used defamation laws to target minorities. And then I got a fellowship with POMED, which is a think tank in DC, a project on Middle East democracy. I focus on US assistance to Egypt. And then I got to my final project, a fellowship with TIMEP, where I focus on exile activism and transnational repression. And this project basically came to my mind because of my experience as someone who's living abroad in Egypt and thinking about how Egyptians diaspora or exile, or Egyptian generally living abroad, can send their political remittances, can be part of changing the political reality in Egypt, and what are the opportunities that are that they can do, what are the forms of activism they have adopted so far, also what are the challenges that are facing them, including how the Egyptian regime or the Egyptian state is using a wide range of policies to target dissidents abroad, and to debriefing human rights with other international actors, including the US or EU, how they're using their policies to mobilize diaspora to support the state, to support the Egyptian state outside of Egypt. So this is my current research question, and I'm really sorry for taking so long time.
That was fascinating and really, really important work. Oh my God. And I wanted to dive a little bit into your program at the University of Minnesota as well. And can you tell us about the broader significance of your work over there and also your fellowship with Penn America? Because that's also a massive, massive kudos to you.
Yeah, as I told you, I started doing research and working in the human rights field without getting the proper education that's enabled me to do this work, because my background is coming from engineering. So I thought it's the right time to study humanities, and because I'm like into humanities, but like from a, we can say, like a policy perspective. So I went to this program at University of Minnesota. It's a 2 years master's program. I'm doing masters of human rights, and um, it's for me an amazing project, because I'm always thinking about how I can convert knowledge into activism. So for me, um, I'm not the typical, or I'm not looking for to be the typical academic, but I'm thinking about knowledge and experience as a tool for activism, as a tool for changing the reality of my home country. Last year, I worked on this research project that's focusing on how authoritarian regimes around the globe are using a wide range of tactics to undermine academic freedom in US universities or Western universities. So I looked at the effect of transnational repression on academic freedom in US universities. I looked on the effect of digital transnational repression on the academics and international students here in the US, because I'm international students, and I still think twice before speaking about the Egyptian regime in classes, before writing about the Egyptian regime in classes. Here in University of Minnesota, a Chinese student, for example, tweeted about the Chinese president, and once he arrived back in China, he was arrested. Few days ago, we have seen the Egyptian Saudi rights activist who she is a PhD student at Leeds University, and once she arrived in Saudi Arabia, she was arrested and sentenced to 34 years because of this app, Kullina We Are All Securities, that she was reported to. So I'm looking at how this kind of repression affecting academics, scholars, and international students in Western universities, and how Western universities should counter this repression and provide safe space for its students, and how they should be a space for activism and an advocate for democracy and human rights. How they should, for example, urge the administration, this kind of administration, to adopt a significant policies towards counter transnational oppression. So, so this is my project here. This year, I'm trying to think about expanding, looking at the cooperation between authoritarian regimes and Western universities, and how they're using their fund to silence academic work here. Also, how they use satellite universities and satellite campuses in their homeland. Like, for example, we have Georgetown in Qatar, we have NYU in Abu Dhabi, we have the similar universities in China, for example. How they thinking about getting this kind of knowledge without transferring the academic freedom that's associated with this kind of knowledge. So how's this affecting international students who are studying there at NYU Abu Dhabi, for example? In 2018, a PhD student, a UK PhD student, was accused of being a spy for the UK government and was arrested by the UAE. And in Georgetown, Qatar, there are a lot of challenges related to academic freedom. So this is what I'm basically looking at right now. Um, in this summer, I worked with Pan America on digital authoritarianism, and I also worked with the Human Rights Foundation on two research topics that I'm interested in. One related to the coming World Cup in Qatar, and how Qatar is using this event for sports washing, and how they should ensure basic human rights before the World Cup in terms of LGBT rights who are going to attend, LGBT people who are going to attend this important event, women's rights, which is like historically always at high risk at this big sports event. Also, how they should compensate migrant workers who suffered during the last 10 years building this stadiums. Also, thinking about this occasion or this important event as a venue for transnational repression, because Qatar has a history of deporting activists to their home countries, including Saudi activist who was an asylum seeker in Norway and who was in his way back to Norway, and he was deported in 2017 to Saudi Arabia, and he's currently in jail. A significant part of the fans will stay in UAE and UAE because it's so close to Qatar, and also it provides them with a lifestyle that they are looking for. So there's always a risk. There is also a risk for these fans to stay in UAE. If someone is connected with any political opposition, he might be deported to their home countries. So this is what I'm looking at regarding the World Cup. Also, last 2 months ago, I think UAE forced Amazon to restrict the access of LGBT products on Amazon UAE. So if you are in UAE, you can, for example, purchase a book through Amazon about LGBT rights. You can purchase anything that's associated with LGBT. This is a sign that UAE, so its domestic laws, can force Amazon to obey or to accept their regulation. The data privacy law in UAE allow UAE to access any sort of data that's might be that might constitute a risk for national security. So by this, UAE might have access to our data, to data for academics, for journalists, for human rights defenders, for human rights organizations, and this, I think, it's extremely risky. Also, authoritarian regimes used to hire spies working on this big tech. Just last month, a Saudi spy used to work for Twitter, and he reported and provided the Saudi regime with data about Saudi activists, Twitter users who used to use Twitter with a pen name or an unreal name. He provided the Saudi Arabian regime with the real data about them, and then they were like arrested. This Twitter employee was convicted here in the US and was through a federal court. So also we are thinking about wondering how Amazon will vet its employee in the UAE, and how we can make sure that none of them is cooperating closely with one of the MENA authoritarian regimes.
Wow, this is such incredible work, and I'm honestly really fascinated by everything that you're thinking through, and cannot wait to read more of your research and promote it on our website. And going back to international activists, scholar activists such as yourself, in thinking through your positionality, how do you define your relationship to the population that you study, and what responsibility do you think you have in sharing their stories?
Yeah, I mean, however, I'm trying to kind of diversify my research interests, but I think all my research questions are coming from my personality. So when I moved to exile, like my question became, my research question became, how I can me and other Egyptians in exile think about contributing to change the political reality in Egypt. When I became international students, I think about, okay, I'm here as international students and looking at other international students coming from authoritarian regimes, how we can collectively work together to counter this kind of risk and intimidation coming by authoritarian regimes. So I always think about my research question as something I'm living through, not not something like fascinating for me, and I want to study. And I, from one hand, I try to do research to understand, but on the other hand, I'm trying to make this research policy oriented, targeting policymakers, because this is how I can see part of the change, but also how we can think about organizing on the ground. So with Egyptians in exile, there are always a kind of conversations about how we can organize in exile through different organization or individually or even through some sort of book clubs, some sort of like academic conversation and intellectual conversation here and the university, international students thinking about how we can get together, advocate in front of the university administration to adopt its policies to our situation. So this is how I think about research as a tool for changing the reality I'm facing right now.
Gorgeous answer. Thank you. Thank you for that. And now that you have lived outside of Egypt for a good while, has your relationship to Egypt changed in any way? And in a sense, what does Egypt mean to you?
I don't know. This is a very kind of difficult question. I lived outside of Egypt, but in the same time, I felt um like on a daily basis, I'm watching and I'm seeing what's happening in Egypt, like through social media, through news, through this stuff. I always, because the time difference, I always like wake up late when like everything happened in Egypt, and then it shocked like very very late when people like actually moved from the shocking mood to like analyzing stuff. I like, to be honest, I don't have a clear answer. Egypt is the country that I want to change, and I want to be part of its history. However, I'm living in the United States. I'm not thinking about myself as an American or some. I'm not American, but as an American or someone looking forward to be American or caring about domestic politics here in the US. For me, the US is a place where I I just I'm here and I'm using this important venue for bringing better future to Egypt. But um, I'm trying to understand what's happening here also. But there are also a lot of like structural barriers as um, forbidding me from doing this. I'm I'm not sure if I'm fully aware of what's going on in Egypt right now, because I'm not living there, and this is a very challenging part. I'm doing all my research around Egypt or a significant part of it, but I I'm not sure if this is the reality, and I'm not sure if there is a reality for Egypt, because even researchers who go back to Egypt and do the research, for example, or live there for a while, they are banned from conducting research, because if in order for you to do a field work and do interviews with people, it's a very, very risky task to do in Egypt, given that Egypt is a country who killed Giulio Gini, the PhD student. So I'm just thinking that is no one real reality about what is going on in Egypt, and I'm using the tools that I have right now to produce the narratives that I think that's might be closer to the reality. But I'm sure that this narrative um, is not complete, and it has a lot of downsizes, or it has a lot of like it's not a complete thing. And like in our research, we always write that we have this research has a lot of limitations, and our understanding of Egypt right now has a lot of limitations because it's really hard to get information or data from Egypt. But also, this understanding is contributing to counter the regime narrative. So, like I told you, academia for me is important, but what's more important for me is how we can convert this into activist tool or something to counter the regime narrative.
I asked a very difficult question, I know, and thank you for analyzing it from all kinds of perspectives and showing how difficult it is to be in exile but also maintain some sort of relationship with your homeland. Speaking of homelands and nations and all of that, as scholars, what sort of impact do you believe we should have in an increasingly xenophobic and nationalistic global climate?
I think this should be in the center of the academic work. Uh, and in order for this to happen, I think there should be some sort of recognition of the differences between people who are doing the same work, but they are coming from different backgrounds, and their struggle and their suffering is very, very different. As someone who only have Egyptian passport, I always apply for conferences, and I go to try to apply for the visa, and I always get it late even beyond the conference, or I don't find appointments, or it's just pretty hard to travel in a conference that you are accepted. And this is like the very, very basic thing. I remember when I arrived in the US, I was stopped in the airport, and I was asked where I'm coming from and why I'm choosing this university. And the guy assumed that I'm Muslim, and I'm Muslim, but at this time I was going to join Notre Dame University, but I changed my mind last minute. And he told me, for example, you are Muslim and you're joining a Catholic university. And I said, yeah, like it's not your business. I mean, I'm Muslim. I'm joining a university knows that I'm Muslim, and it knows that university is a Catholic university. And I mean, like I'm saying this example to say how like colored people in academia are suffering on a kind of a daily basis. How their like their economic vulnerability and their legal status, and even emotional stability doing this work from abroad, is it needs from academia specific attention, especially if you're like coming from authoritarian regime. To this adds to the barriers that you are facing. So I think it should start just with recognizing all these challenges that colored academics are struggling with, and then it should move to adopting policies to counter this, or to compensate this, or to customize our academia based on these challenges. Because most of the time I feel like the academic institutions are kind of blind they cannot see these differences. They cannot, even if like one academic or two academics, they recognize this, they write about this. But I think we should move from writing about this also to changing this reality in our like small sphere, even in the academic work and the human rights field, and try to think about how we should navigate this, how we should like decrease the effect of these barriers on colored academics.
Another beautiful answer. Thank you so much for that. And considering the state of Middle Eastern studies more generally, and your research on Egypt and the broader region, and its communities and its academics more specifically, what topics and issues do you like academics to address more?
I'm currently like thinking about technology and energy as a two as a two important factors that are redefining what's the Middle East. So I think, but unfortunately, most of the discussions around energy or technology or even climate change are centered in the technical side of this discussion and centered around or coming from the security studies, coming from uh, um, um, like the technical field for these studies. And there's not enough attention for people studying humanities, and they are um, um, biased to human rights and democracy, to study this kind of fields and see how these topics are affecting democracy and human rights. How, for example, authoritarian regimes in the MENA region weaponize the energy and the current crisis to increase the human rights violations and to consolidate their power domestically. How they are using technology, and we discussed this before, to how and business innovation and all the topics related to AI and big data and all this amazing topics and important for business and for innovation, but as using them for repression, and how we cannot separate both things, how you can separate these tools as tools for business and for innovation, and also tools for repression. And I feel like these topics are kind of not getting the enough attention, or not getting the enough attention from academics that I would love to see them working on this kind of topics and analyze them. And this field is kind of controlled by scholars who don't really care about democracy or human rights, and they just care about providing authoritarian regimes in the MENA with recommendations and taking their money in the DC think tanks and this kind of relation. So I think it's important to produce knowledge about this.
So now that we've mentioned some of the things that you do want to see, what's next in store for you? Any future projects you have in mind? Any careers in academia or elsewhere?
This year is my second year, and I'm going to write a thesis, and my thesis will focus on exile activism and what I call the politics of transnational repression. So, like several research focus on transnational repression, documenting the cases, showing the effect of people. But I'm looking at how transnational repression became a political currency between authoritarian regimes that they are trading off. So, for example, China is exporting technology to UAE, and at the same time, UAE is exporting goods back to China. Uh, Saudi Arabia is supporting the economy in Turkey, and Turkey is closing the case against Khashoggi. Egypt is supporting Eritrean activists back to Eritrea, and it uses Eritrea support for the counting the Ethiopian dam. Egypt supporting it goes back to China and building economic cooperation with China. So how transnational repression became a political currency between authoritarian regimes. For example, you can look at how still till now Saudi Arabia has access to Pegasus. This is spyware that used against Gamal Khashoggi and several activists because Israel is care about the relationship with Saudi Arabia, how several regimes support, always in a continuous support to Israel in the Security Council because they have acquired Pegasus from Israel. So I'm looking at how technology also and digital transnational repression became a tool that people are or certain regimes are trading off. And from one side, we're seeing the current administration is enacting a lot of policies towards countering transnational repression, including Khashoggi ban, including Magnitsky sanctions, and other stuff. But when it comes to holding officials who are associated with authoritarian regimes, but also close ally regimes to US, so they never been held accountable. So when the FBI here arrested a spy working for the Saudi Arabia or working for Egypt, they never go beyond and arrest the officials back or even sanctions the official back in Egypt or Saudi Arabia for recruiting this spy in the US. When we all found that Pegasus was used against US diplomats, uh, NSO, the companies that created Pegasus and other spywares, just put on the entity list by the Department of Commerce, and it wasn't sanctioned by Department of Treasury. So because the like a very special relationship between US and Israel, for example. So like how the international relations redefine transnational repression and become a real barrier for even democratic power and democratic states that we are relying on to counter international repression. So they are not doing the work because they have other interests related to national security and the relationship with other regimes. So I'm looking at international repression, but from international relation perspective.
I cannot wait to read more of your work in such an interesting interplay between states, institutions, and individuals. Seriously, what an honor to talk to you, Mohamed, today. Thank you so much for this chance to get to know you better, and cannot wait to promote more of your work on our digital cafe.
Thank you, Laila, for this amazing interview and for the amazing work you are doing with Egypt migration. It's like really a privilege for me to be with you today. Thank you so much.